The Detroit Lions suffered a disappointing loss to the Seattle Seahawks in week 2 of the NFL season. What were some of my biggest takeaways and observations from this game? Let's talk about all of that and more, starting right now. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Miko, and in today's video, we are going to take a look at some of my biggest takeaways and observations to come out of the Lions versus Seahawks matchup that took place yesterday. Now, as we all know, the Lions suffered their first loss of the NFL season, and while it was very disappointing to see the Lions lose at home in a game where many of us expected the Lions to come out on top, myself included, there were a number of things that really stood out from this game to kind of really highlight exactly what went wrong and why the Lions came out on the losing end of this game. But also on the flip side of that, there were a number of good things to come out of this game as well. So we're going to highlight some of the bad, we're going to highlight some of the good, and talk about it all in this video. And like always, these are just my takeaways. If you guys have different observations or some other things that you thought stood out in this game, be sure to leave those in the comment section of this video. But without further ado, let's get into the number one thing that really stood out to me in this game. And that being the overall impact that turnovers had on this game. And not just the fact that the Lions committed turnovers, but the fact that they weren't able to force any on the defensive side of the football either. The Lions lost the turnover battle 3-0 to the Seattle Seahawks, and two of those turnovers being very big in the fact that they turned into points. One of those being a fumble by David Montgomery, and we all saw the pick six that ended Jared Goff's streak of passes thrown without an interception. Both of those contributed to 14 points for the Seattle Seahawks, which not only put them in the game, but also put them ahead and put the Lions in a position where they were going to have to play catch up throughout the rest of the game. Now, there's no way around it. Both of these turnovers were absolutely backbreakers. David Montgomery's fumble ended an opportunity for the Lions to be able to go up 2 scores on the Seattle Seahawks, and Jared Goff's pick six couldn't have come at a worse moment when they were already behind by 3 points, and that turnover immediately put them behind by 10 points. And while, again, the Lions offense did find opportunities to score after these turnovers and were able to keep themselves in the game and ultimately push it to overtime, you can't help but think that if without those mistakes, this game is drastically different, and we're possibly talking about the Lions being 2-0 instead of 1-1. And again, to go back to the fact that the defense didn't force a turnover, again, that allowed Seattle to be able to work in a situation where they could actually figure out their offense and not have to be too focused on every play being perfect. They were able to kind of just take their time, allow their defense to apply pressure on our offense, and on the offensive end, just dink and dunk their way down the field and be able to take advantage of our defense in various situations. Now, one of the other big takeaways that I did have from this game that I don't want to get lost when talking about turnovers is the overall performance that both Jared Goff and David Montgomery had in this game. The way that these two players performed on Sunday, especially David Montgomery before he got hurt, directly contributed to not only the Lions being able to have the lead at certain times in this game, but also part of the reason why they were able to push it to overtime in the first place. Jared Goff had an amazing stat line where he was able to throw for over 300 yards, was able to still throw for 3 touchdowns. And yes, he does have that one interception, but for most of the game had complete command and was able to operate in a really efficient way in this football game. Made a number of big time throws and made a number of throws that honestly in the past I would have never thought he would make. But when his team really needed him to step up, and especially when he needed to, kind of make up for the mistakes that he had made, Jared Goff was absolutely game to do that. And David Montgomery was just a strong runner on the day. 16 carries for over 60 yards, and he was just consistently kind of pushing the pile. Being able to pick up 4.7 yards per carry is a strong performance by your starting running back. And the fact that he was able to get in the end zone for a touchdown as well. Honestly, probably should have had 2 touchdowns on the day if it's not for a really bad offensive pass interference call. But nonetheless, those two guys, well, yes, they did have mistakes, and those mistakes were very, very costly. Those should not overshadow the overall performance that they had in this game, and the fact that they are two of the biggest contributors to why this team was in position to at least win the game at various points. Another player that really contributed in this game that I also don't want to overlook, just for the simple fact that the Lions did lose, is the performance of tight end Sam LaPorta. Another player that I want to highlight on the offensive side of the ball that had a good game despite the loss is that play of Sam LaPorta. Now, the tight end out of Iowa is obviously going to have his bumps and obviously has his ups and downs throughout the season. But so far through 2 games, Sam Laporta is just continuing to show a strong performance. Being able to pick up another game with 5 receptions, going over 60 yards as well, is just kind of proof of why the Lions felt the need to draft him as high as they did in the second round. And while there were a number of people that weren't confident the Lions needed another tight end, or especially a tight end drafted that high, Sam is at least showing he is worth the investment. He made a number of big time catches, had an amazing stiff arm on Bobby Wagner that really kind of got me out of my seat, and is starting to kind of showcase the ability that, like, you know what, with enough time, with enough growth, and especially if he's able to stay healthy, he could have a very strong and long and successful career in the NFL at the tight end position. And I know that's a lot to say for a rookie who's only coming off of his second game, but so far early in his career, he's already among the best tight ends in the NFL when you start to look at receiving yards because he's fourth in that department. And then when you start to look at rookie receivers, period, he's in the top 10 of that as well. Again, it's early, and I don't want to put too much hype over on Sam, but if Jared Goff and him continue to be able to grow this chemistry and he's able to continue to just find his footing in the NFL and showcase that he can be a safety blanket for Jared Goff or just be someone that he can rely on, it wouldn't surprise me if Sam by the end of this year is among the better tight ends in the NFL when we're talking about stats and just overall performance in his rookie season. Now, my last 2 takeaways were overly positive and especially focusing on the offensive side of the football. Unfortunately, we're going to have to take another turn down some of the more negative things to come out of this game. And one of those being just the performance by some of the coaches on this coaching staff. Now, starting with AG, most of you guys know I'm a big fan of AG. Really love him as a coach. But going into this game, I definitely felt that, like, you know what, this was a game where he should have played more zone. And he absolutely did that. Now, what I didn't expect was for him to play so much off zone. His corners gave a lot of cushion to these receivers and to these tight ends, which made it very easy for them to work these underneath routes and kind of make it easy for their offensive line so that Gino only had to take, short dropbacks and be able to get the ball out fairly quickly. And that continuously hurt this defense throughout the game. So while Aaron Glenn did do a good job in choosing to go zone, he did make some questionable decisions in how he asked his corners to play in coverage, which just seemed to kind of doom this defense the longer this game went on. Also, he also had a few other questionable decisions when having guys like James Houston try to defend tight ends or even Charles Harris doing the same thing. Again, those are small plays here and there, but overall, while I didn't have a huge issue with the idea of like, hey, let's play more zone, how they chose to play those zone coverages and the fact that they didn't mix in more man coverage to at least make Gino think is the thing that kind of caught me off guard. Next, let's talk about Ben Johnson. And again, the offense played great outside of those turnovers that they had. But when David Montgomery went down with his injury, I definitely expected there to be more Jahmyr Gibbs and at least Jahmyr Gibbs doing some of the same things that David Montgomery did. And I don't know why I necessarily thought that, but I just kind of figured like, hey, the Lions are having a lot of success running these types of plays for David Montgomery. At least you would think that they would try these same type of plays with Jahmyr Gibbs to see if they could have the same success. However, when Jahmyr Gibbs came into the game, it just felt like they were running a lot of running plays that were specifically designed for Jahmyr Gibbs. And with those linebackers on the Seattle Seahawks, they were just kind of all over a lot of those outside zones or a lot of those plays where they were trying to stretch their defense to the sidelines. Those guys are very athletic. And while Jahmyr Gibbs is lightning in a bottle, even he found himself on the wrong end of a lot of those run plays. So it's a small thing when it comes to Ben Johnson. I think, again, of the coaches, he probably did the best job, and there's not a lot to really criticize. But that is one of those things where you kind of look back and you're just like, man, maybe if you called some of these different plays or called some of the same plays that were working with David Montgomery, maybe you could have had more success and this Lions offense could have taken more control of the game going forward. And last but not least, we have to talk about Dan Campbell. And when it comes to Dan Campbell, it's always usually the same conversation, which is how aggressive he chooses to be on fourth down. Now, for anybody who doesn't know, me personally, I am very much in a pass fail mindset when it comes to Dan Campbell and these fourth down calls. If they work, great. If they don't work, obviously he's going to open himself up to criticism. However, in this game, I feel like the criticism that he's getting is very much deserved, especially with the 4th and 2 call that he had, where the Lions had a really good opportunity already leading by 4 points to just punt the ball away and at least try to pin Seattle deep. Not to mention, sometimes when you have these types of special team calls and you're just punting the ball away, maybe a returner gets lazy, maybe a returner tries to do too much, and you can force turnovers in these situations by not giving your special teams unit those opportunities and kind of, just putting your offense forward and in the front lines all the time. Not only does it kind of take away from what your special teams unit could create, it also puts your defense in a really tough bind, which is exactly what happened when they didn't convert that 4th and 2. And now Seattle has a much shorter field to work with, which they eventually convert and turn into a touchdown and now go up by 3 points. Again, I'm the type of person, like I said, if Dan wants to go for these 4th down calls, again, I'm fine with them as long as they're converting. But some of these, I agree with some of the fan base that are saying, like, hey, be a little more conservative and play the long game, especially when you have the lead. There's no need to kind of be overly aggressive when you're already in firm control of this game. Give your defense more opportunities to make plays or at least make Seattle work harder to be able to get into scoring position. And last but not least, one of my biggest takeaways to come from this game, and it's one of the things that had me the most disappointed coming out of this game against the Seahawks, is the overall performance by the defensive line. And specifically talking about the defensive tackles or the players that were playing on the interior of the defensive line. So that is the likes of Aleem McNeil, Benito Jones, Levi Onwuzurike, and even John Kaminsky on a couple plays here and there. Those 4 players didn't register a stat line. No tackles, no sacks. I believe Aleem may have had a pressure, but outside of that, no TFLs, no hits on the quarterback. And that is a clear sign of why this offense was able to eventually find their groove without any pressure coming up the middle. And even from the outside, from your defensive ends or your edge rushers, Gino was able to just kind of find his targets here and there. And they never really took advantage of this makeshift offensive line that a lot of us were talking about, for the simple fact that, like, hey, they were down a couple players. And so for that to be something to stand out in this game, for that defensive line to not have a sack, and now we're getting to the point where they're 2 games into the season and there's only been 1 sack by the defense, but it's not by the defensive line, is something that has me a little concerned going forward. Now, I do believe that they can turn it around. I do believe that Aiden Hutchinson is eventually going to have a multi-sack game. I do think that Charles Harris is going to get a sack in one of these games because these guys are close. When you go back and you watch this game, Aiden had 6 pressures. Charles Harris had 3. They're getting close, but it's the difference between getting close and then being able to convert those so that it drastically changes how that offense works. When you're not getting hits on the quarterback, when you're not getting sacks, there's a level of comfort that a quarterback is able to just work with. And as we saw, Gino was able to do that and be able to just be on time and be in rhythm. This is something that not only does Aaron Glenn have to fix, because I don't even know if this is necessarily an AG issue. I think it's something that the players themselves have to kind of look at themselves in the mirror and do what Dan Campbell kind of talked about in his press conference today. When you have your one-on-one opportunities, guys have to win. And those guys that you rely on to be able to make plays on the defensive end, your Aiden Hutchinsons, your Charles Harrises, your Aleem McNeils, those guys have to show up, and they can't just continue to go through games like this and expect it to be won on the strength of the offense. The defense has to show up, and they have to be more violent and more chaotic, or at least wreaking havoc in the passing game of the offense that they're going up against. So guys, that's going to do it for today's video. Those are some of the biggest takeaways that I had coming out of this Lions Seahawks matchup. Let me know in the comment section below if you agree, if you disagree, if there's some takeaways that you have that I didn't mention. Also, if you're looking for more coverage or just more information on the game yesterday or just any Lions topic in general, you can always head over to pridedetroit.com, where you can catch any of the latest articles that we've uploaded in the last few days. And last but not least, if you're new to this YouTube channel and you've never subscribed before, be sure to hit that notification button. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. That way you can be notified every time we upload a new video to this channel. So guys, that's going to do it. I'm Miko here at Pride of Detroit. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.